just now. My name is Ankur Patel. I'm the Director of Advancement for Hindu University of America. And thank you for joining us today on this webinar about Antaranga Yoga, a path to abiding happiness. As you know, as you hopefully know, Hindu University of America is a platform for Hindus across the world to engage in our culture, our history, and so much knowledge and wisdom that has been passed down for centuries and millennia even. And today we're gonna have this special webinar about Antaranga Yoga featuring Raghu Ananthanarayanan, who has joined us already. Let me give him a brief introduction. Raghuji was actually mentored by three extraordinary teachers in very difficult phases of his life, namely J. Krishnamurti, Yogacharya, Krishnamacharya, and Pulin K. Garg. He was, Raghuji was intimately involved with them for more than a decade over his late 20s. I've heard different stories about how he got on this path, and maybe he'll share some of those with you. His engagement is not only what transformed and evoked from him his sense of service, orientation, his sadhana. His work revolves around helping individuals, groups, and organizations discover their dharma and become the best they can be. And through this webinar, he'll help you get on that path a little bit. He's formally trained as an engineer with his MS in biomedical engineering from IIT Madras. He has been in immersive involvement in questions of human life in academic areas. He has been co-founder of the Sumedas Academy of Human Context since 1995, the Barefoot Academy of Governance with TISS since 2012. He's one of the directors of the Center for Consciousness and Inner Transformation, an initiative of Indic Academy. He's a director of Flame Tao Nowhere. It's a private limited company, and a co-founder of CIT Vidya. He has accomplished and done so many things and started different organizations. He's also authored several books: Learning Through Yoga, The Totally Aligned Organization, Leadership Dharma, Arjuna, The Timeless Metaphor, Organizational Development and Alignment, the Tensegrity Mandala. He was a co-author with Gagandeep Singh. Currently, his wife, Sashiji, and he are, as chief mentors, are nurturing people on a sacred quest at Ritambara Ashram, situated in the beautiful Nilagiris. And with that, sorry for my pronunciation, Raghuji. I'm getting better. I'm trying, but it's an honor and a privilege to have you join us and share with us and our attendees. Maybe if you're joining us, put in the chat where in the world you're joining us from. I'm in Los Angeles. It's always inspiring and cool to see the diversity of folks. Even though we don't have a huge attendance today, maybe we can take a quick second and put in the chat where you're from. Please use the Q&A box if you have a question. We'll get to them at the end. Raghuji, let me hand it off to you.
Thank you, Ankur. Your pronunciation has improved. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we'll get started off. And I'm hoping some of the participants from the earlier programs are here, because I'd love for them to share their experiences too as we go along. Yeah. So there is this question. This title is very intriguing. Nah? This whole idea of abiding happiness. So I was thinking about what abiding happiness would mean, and one of the things that struck me was that there's a very interesting idea in the Shastras that talks about something called the Shesha Prashna. Shesha Prashna means the questions that remain. Yeah. So the idea is that with every engagement that we have with the world, at the end of that engagement, there are a few questions we are left with. And these questions, especially in the context of an individual's life, are very critical questions. And these are the three questions that they talk about are: who am I, where am I, and why am I here? And what this idea of Shesha Prashna, or the the remaining questions implies is that the way we answer these questions is critical to our experiencing of happiness or not experiencing. So this then becomes a very critical thing. Yeah, how do you look at these three questions? Who am I? Where am I? Why am I here? And what answers do I give them? And every time I answer these questions, it's not as though these answers are going to remain permanent, because I have to encounter life and engage with life every day. And each time I engage with life, my answers are going to be questioned by the way I engage with life. Yeah. So these three questions then become extremely critical in being able to look at questions of happiness or inner satisfaction or living a meaningful life and so on. Also, these three are very interesting questions, because you can ask these questions in various time frames. Yeah. For example, I can ask this question before I come into a dialogue like this. Who am I? Where am I? Why am I here? And if I answer these questions in a way that has a has a correspondence with the way many of you have answered this question, then a dialogue becomes possible. An engagement becomes possible. But if there are divergences in these three questions and what I'm bringing in and what you expect, then obviously my experience will not be one of flow, nor will your experience be one of flow. Yeah. So this is a very important idea, which I think gives us a different way of looking at this question of happiness. Because otherwise, uh, happiness is all about having Coca-Cola or something like this. It gets translated into very superficial ideas, and maybe it doesn't always induce us to look at ourselves very carefully. Yeah. So having said that, can I just have some sense of uh, what some of you might be looking for in this chat? I'll see if I can address myself to some of these things. Yeah. So could anybody would anybody like to share what they're expecting, how they look at these questions and so on, so it can be a more of a dialogue than just my talking?
Yeah, please put it in the chat. These important questions: who am I? Where am I here? Why am I here? Your thoughts on it. Just put it in the chat, please, so that we can engage you. Doesn't have to be too profound. Just what your thoughts are.
Ankur, if some of them would like to come on screen and have a chat with me, that's great.
Um, if you want to raise your hand in the participant window, especially if
Yeah.
you have, I don't know if somebody who, okay, there's some things coming up. There we go.
Okay, I'm here. I'm seeing some questions. What's the difference between Antaranga yoga and other yogas? How is the physical yoga versus the meditative part? Why is unconditional happiness not sustainable? Meaning of yoga in daily life, grihastha. I'm seeking more information on the questions being asked. These questions are timeless. How do you remain happy and how does yoga help? Okay. So, okay, interesting. So let me try and answer some of these as we go along. Yeah. The I think I'd like to start with this grihastha question, because I think To me, that's very critical, especially uh, in the way Krishnamacharya taught yoga to us. Um, there are different ways of looking at yoga, at the question of yoga, but uh, to him, the idea of a grihastha who practices yoga is very central. Okay, the reason is very simple. The reason is that the entire society is actually built on the idea of a grihastha. So if you look at the Mahabharata, it actually talks about this. It talks about the fact that the life of the grihastha is more important than any of the other ashramas. And that's because the grihastha is the one who is generating all the wealth. He's the one who is looking after society. And the ability of a grihastha to live a life which is steeped in yoga is very central to the entire Mahabharata. So there are some very interesting stories about this, yeah, and some of you might know these stories. There's one that I remember where there's a dialogue between Narada and Krishna and Vishnu, and Narada asks him, who is your most beloved devotee? So Krishna says, I'll show you, and takes him to the earth, brings him to the earth, and shows him, takes him to the home of a farmer. So he says, just watch this farmer for the day. So the farmer starts in the morning. As soon as he gets up, he says Narayana, Narayana, Narayana 3 times, does his work. Before he eats in the afternoon, he says Narayana 3 times. Before he goes to sleep, he says Narayana 3 times. So Narada is very confused. So he says, what do you mean by this? I'm thinking of you all the time. Here, this person is just saying a few times. How can he be a better a devotee than me? So Krishna says, yeah, take this pot, keep it on your head. He fills it with water and then says, just walk around the field of this farmer. Make sure that not a drop falls away, falls down from this pot. So Narada, with all his concentration and his ability, walks and is very careful not to drop a single drop. So he comes back feeling very accomplished. And Krishna asks him, how many times did you think about me when you walked? And then he says that the attitude with which this farmer does his work is much more involved with me than you were when you were so worried about this pot in your head. And there are several stories like this where the householder is celebrated as the central person in Hindu thought. And in fact, the greatest yogi is supposed to be Janaka, because Janaka is the person who has power. He's a great king, and yet he does not misuse his power in any way and lives like a yogi does in the center of immense power. So in all of the Mahabharata, in all of the scriptures, the life of the grihastha is very central. Okay, and there is also this idea of pravritti and nivritti. So in the yogic way of looking at things, the inner and the outer are not privileged against each other. Yeah. So there was one of these questions about the physical yoga versus the other things. There is no such division in the Yoga Sutra. So, for example, the Yoga Sutra talks about yama and niyama as very important things. And the first yama is ahimsa. Now, ahimsa cannot be practiced unless there is an inner work. So, ahimsa is not a bahiranga. So, how I deal with my neighbor, how I deal with people in my family, how I deal with strangers, all of these are included in the idea of the yama. And none of the practices of yama can be done with flow, with a sense of balance, with a sense of grace, if the inner processes are not worked with. So that's the antaranga part of it. And the way I deal with other people becomes the bahiranga part. And this is not only the central anchor on which society is built, which is why the practice of yama and the inner cleansing is so important. It's also the final arbiter of whether or not I really have internalized the practices of yoga. And the the interesting thing is that the Yoga Sutra will also talk about this, that my inner work reflects in my breath. My inner work reflects in the quality of grace in my body. So when I'm doing asana practice, when I'm doing pranayama practice, which are considered bahiranga, unless there is a quality of attentiveness, unless there is a quality of dhyana, neither will my asana be smooth, nor will my breathing be smooth, nor will my mind experience cleansing. So in the Yoga Sutra, these are all looked at as interdependent practices, and the Ashtanga Yoga, unfortunately, is sometimes talked about in linear ways, whereas the ideal way to look at it is more like a spiral. So the more I work with asana, the more I work with pranayama, the more I become self-aware. The more self-aware I am, the more attentive I can be in my interface with people. The more attentive I am with interface with people, the less dukkha I create for myself. I have greater space to live in. I can act from a greater sense of grace. I can act from dharma and so on. So it's a spiraling kind of process that is recommended. Yeah. So one of the critical things that the Yoga Sutra talks about and all the Yoga Shastras talk about is that we often get triggered to asking critical questions and becoming self-reflective only when we come into certain turning points in life, or when we experience something which asks us deep questions of ourselves. It's very rare for a person to start becoming meditative, to start looking at life seriously right from the word go. Yeah. And then what happens is that when some of these events, when we confront some of these events, the first urge that we have to look, I mean, that takes over is an urge to look for answers outside. So we go and ask somebody else, or we go and read something, or we look for an escape. Something like this happens, right? And this process only reinforces the same mind that created the problems and created the issues to start with. It's the same mind that is not able to have an insight into the nature of the self and to the nature of the world outside. So the entire practice of yoga recommends that we do not look for answers outside. Okay, so it says that these are very important questions. And when these questions get triggered, one has to understand how to seek the answers for oneself. So there are many methods that are given in the Yoga Sutra. One of the simpler method that's talked about, and one of the most effective ones, in fact, is what is called Kriya Yoga. So in the Yoga Sutra, the Kriya Yoga comprises of three things. It comprises of tapas, which is a set of practices that help you to ripen the body, ripen your system, and so on. It is not ascetic practices as it is usually translated. It's more of maturing of the self, maturing of the body. And the second practice is called swadhyaya, which is the inward practice, where I start to understand myself more and more subtly. I start to have a meditative mind and I'm able to understand my world and the context I'm in with much more clarity. And the third step is called Ishvara Pranidhana, where I'm then able to bring whatever capabilities I have to others in a way that is filled with a sense of service and in a way that is dharmic and in a way that has a dedication to a larger truth. Yeah, so this again links the external to the internal in a beautifully flowing, spiraling, cyclical kind of way. So the entire process of yoga has this very critical part, which is called the Swadhyaya. And that Swadhyaya part is what is Antaranga Yoga. Yeah, the other name for Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya means going closer and closer to my true self. So that's the critical part of the process of Antaranga Yoga. Yeah, and one of the easiest ways of entering this whole practice of Swadhyaya is the Mahabharata. And Mahabharata is obviously my favorite book because it's like a mirror unto oneself. Yeah, and it's one of the most important psychologists in India, a person called Girindra Shekhar Bose, who was a contemporary of Freud and very highly regarded by the international community and Freud himself, has written about the Mahabharata, and he says that the Mahabharata is like a compendium of the most beautiful case studies he's ever read. Yeah, so the Mahabharata is filled with situations and stories of the human condition, the nature of society, the nature of turmoil. What does it mean to seek a path that is meaningful? And how does one deal with oneself if one finds that one's actions are not the best? And how do you seek a process where you finally transcend dukkha and enter into what is referred to as ananda? So abiding happiness is possible, and abiding happiness is something very deep and subtle. And the word that is used in yoga to describe this is ananda. And ananda is described as a state where you feel extremely calm, you feel extremely balanced, you're very filled with the possibilities of rasa, of beauty, and you're not your mind is not caught with any self-centered activity whatsoever. So the entire process of looking at swadhyaya, looking at one's own self, the structure and nature of one's mind is very easily done through the Mahabharata, which is why I love the text. Yeah, so the course that we're going to be working with uh, is primarily to help you look at the Mahabharata and through Mahabharata, turn it around, make the Mahabharata a mirror unto oneself, and then start understanding myself. So the Mahabharata becomes a starting point, and through this, we will also understand many ideas from the Yoga Sutra, because there's a deep connection between yoga, the Yoga Sutras, and the Mahabharata. Yeah, the interesting thing is that Vyasa is supposed to have been invited by Brahma to write the Mahabharata as a way of communicating the truths of the Vedas to people in a way that is full of rasad, which is full of drama, and to communicate the fundamental truths of yoga through stories. So it is sometimes referred to as the fifth Veda also. Yes, so that's in brief the idea of Antaranga Yoga.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I feel like when you speak, you bring that calmness and you share it, and that's part of,
I
what
do.
we're here
Good,
for.
good for me, Ankur. Would some of the participants like to share what they have experienced through the program, and then we can throw it open for questions?
Yeah, I have Joyataji. Maybe I can bring them on board as a
Yeah.
panelist. Let's see, somebody has their hand raised. Let me see who it is.
Lovena?
Yeah, I can bring Luvena up on a panelist and see if she wants to. There we go. Yeah, go ahead. Raghuji, if you want to prime, or if you want to just let Bijoyataji speak, go ahead.
Yeah, Nitya? Yeah, if Nitya is here, ask her to join in, yeah? Ankur, it'll be nice if people can come up onto the screen and ask the question.
Yes,
Because it's
I
kind of
am.
eerie, no? To have some question just get typed out and you don't know who's asking the question. And I'm not used to this box.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and ask or make your testimonial, brought two folks up on the panel.
Do you want to go? Do you want me to? Okay. Um, good morning. For me, when I look at this course, or who am I in this course, I don't look at like I'm a participant of a last course or a former course, because this is a practice that has become a part of me. And I feel like I'm in it. It's not that I hear Raghuji's voice, but I hear my own voice with greater clarity. And it is a lifelong practice that I see. I have been very lucky to come across. And I came in through yoga, but it is now that my yoga practice has found greater depth and sustainability, because what I am doing, who am I, where am I, the answers may not be there, but the process to access those questions is very well grounded. So therefore, when I'm on the mat or off the mat or on a Zoom call with my students, I don't feel lost. I feel I am with myself and I'm working. And this is the gift of the Antaranga process. I don't want to go into the details of how it happens. I'm sure Raghuji will answer those questions. I can say where I am in this journey is that up until then, I feel my whole life was a reaction to people, to events, to action. And being a journalist, I would always arrive at places where things happened. But now I'm operating from a place of reflection. Um, Parts of me that used to get very provoked, I feel have found a little bit more grounding. And everything that I do is from a place of being evoked, being inspired. For example, waking up early or showing up for this is not a duty or anything. It is being moved. Because every time I interact with Raghuji in some form, I have like two pages of notes right away. So this is because I feel moved by the process itself. And the fun part is that I think when we enter into that evening get together, nobody knows what stories will come to us. I don't think Raghuji ever comes with a script or a text. None of us, the interaction leads us to places and text and people. And I feel like if I could join and be in every single Antaranga experience rather. So with that, I'll let Nitya continue.
Thanks. Yeah, there's a lot to say actually about this class. I think the first thing to be said is that the learning is a continuous process. There's no state of arrival whatsoever. I think at the end of this 11-week class, rather certain, let's say, ways of thinking, methods of self-inquiry got triggered. And ultimately the real work is continuing that. So this is one point I wanted to make. I mean, just in terms of the format of the class, basically every week we were given short stories to read of different characters in the Mahabharata. And we had to write brief reflections, our reactions to the story. And then the class was entirely dialogical. I mean, each of the participants basically we're asked to present our reflections, and then there's a kind of, really a dialogue that happens. And I think that this element of the, this element of the class, this kind of dialogical process is central to the pedagogy because, I think, now just even listening to what you said, Raghu, there are points that you made, which, it's quite beautiful to hear them again, but I think, one of the things that I really took from this class was the idea that ultimately all learning and self-inquiry, is our own responsibility. And I think, what was really very interesting was learning how to read, some of the stories that we're introduced to as allegories. I mean, really a kind of, how do you begin to read this text in order to examine one's own psyche? And this is not something that came at all naturally, or I didn't know how to do it at all in the beginning. And this was something I began to learn. And so I think there are a couple of issues that were really, important. One, to accept that actually part of the human condition is to be filled with inner conflicts, because rather than dealing with that with a kind of sense of frustration, there's in fact a recognition that yes, of course, we have these conflicts, and part of the kind of experience of life is how do we actually engage and become aware of these conflicts. And second, I think this approach of how the characters in the Mahabharata can be used as kind of their archetypes of certain qualities that reside in us, and these different qualities can create conflicts and contradictions. That was very important for me to learn, as a way of attempting to develop, I suppose, more insight into my parts of my own character. So I mean, yeah, maybe there's a lot more I can say, but I mean, I think I would just say that ultimately, the course, I mean, what the course will do for each of us is what we bring into the course. It's the work that we do, and that is very much emphasized, and that I think is what is very beautiful and emancipatory about the class. Yeah, that's all I want to say. You'll if you take the class, you'll have a really very rich experience. Yeah.
M60110 is Radha. Ellen.
Yes, that's me. I'm sorry. I'm using another
Hi.
computer. Hi. And I don't have a camera on here. That's why I can't put myself on the screen. But yeah, it's I have to ditto everything the others were saying, but I have to also say, in a more personal level for me, I was in a pretty, I would say, a little lost, unsure of myself, and I was feeling kind of jaded. And this taking this course, and I have read the Mahabharata because I just found it very fascinating. Like, it's the stories, the characters, and that they're all shades of gray. Nothing, nobody's entirely good, entirely bad. It is, they have this different emotions and things that they bring. And so I think that's what attracted me to it, because I could see myself. I'm like, I'm one of these people too, and so I think it was a great framework for me to get started. And like others have said, it was hard for me to get through this process of, in an inner meditation. This helped me a lot. It was like the first step towards going through that inner process of reflecting and just being aware of the different things that I deal with situations, and why I do what I do. And one of the critical questions that I think I learned is asking, in doing what I'm doing, what am I really doing? And I think that is the process that I started learning in this course. And I just feel, I mean, I can't say, I mean, it's a lot of work for me to do yet, but it was a great way to start this process, to begin to learn how to do it. Like I said, I was feeling quite lost in that, looking for answers outside and not really knowing how to get myself out of a situation. So this has definitely helped me. And I think one of the best things was I felt more empowered that I could actually make choices for myself, that I could, instead of looking outside, I could look inside and like really figure out how I wanted to bring about a change, or how I was using the tools inside of me to bring about that change. So on a personal level, it was just an amazing class for me. I really can't say enough. And honestly, with Raghuji and all the other people who were there, just sharing that, and really encouraged by the thoughts that we engaged in. We thought we sort of how we helped each other. It was amazing. I really would take it again too if I could, but I think I'd like to go on to some more classes that are being taught by Raghuji. So yeah, I just want to encourage everyone to take it. It's a wonderful class.
It's your turn, Lovina.
Namaste, everyone. Namaste, Raghuji.
And then we'll have some questions. And yeah.
Okay. I think, apart from agreeing with what everyone said, one of the biggest things I can add is to underscore what you said earlier, that everything largely sits on Swadhyaya. And I think in any program that Raghuji helps facilitate, there is this very strong element of encouraging participants to reflect and to bring themselves completely. So there's a lot of Swadhyaya that is encouraged right from the very first session. Even our introductions are very reflective, actually, when we come to think of it. So it begins from there. And the entire space, the space that is held for us throughout the program, no matter what we do, actually helps us bring the scriptures or whatever it is that we are using as a foundation into our lives. So we see transformation happening. And I think this was something that I didn't expect. I was thinking it's going to be something that's textual, that you're going to read through it. And even though I enjoy the introspection, I wasn't expecting it, especially with a group of people who you don't know on the first day. The kind of space that's encouraged, that is created, that every participant and Raghuji help to create, really allows us to connect with what we are studying and build that transformation. And I think all of us are in it. We approach our sadhana, we approach our practice, we approach yoga always with the curiosity of ourselves to transform ourselves, not anyone else. And when that happens, little by little, when the onion's peeled, we get closer to ourselves. And I think for me that was very profound, very transformative, and very deeply touching. It allowed me to connect everything that was beyond the classroom to my life, to within the classroom. There was a seamless flow of things. And I think anyone who takes a program where you actually bring about, experience that union that people speak about, that union that transforms us, is worth the effort. It's something that we do for ourselves, and to find teachers who help us and facilitate us in the process in such a safe way. safety being so important when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable is something I think you should just be here to words that, whatever we are saying, all of us, Vijayata, Nitya, Radhaji, when we're speaking about this, there's only so much you can say, but the feeling that we have inside the transformation is something that is beyond words, isn't it? So I think I'll leave it at that and encourage all of you to please do take this opportunity for yourselves. It's something that you will just absolutely enjoy and enjoy.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Nice listening to you people. Yeah. Yeah. So any questions that I can answer or any of us here can answer? And it'd be nice if you came on and spoke. Huh? So Ankur ji will have to enable this.
Yeah, so as people raise their hand in the participant window, I'll bring them up.
Sure.
And if you want to turn your video camera off, you'll stay as a panelist, but won't be highlighted. It's up to you. So CBS Patelji, a stalwart, and bringing him on board. Sri Kumar Vinekar, he's got his hand up. I think they have a question. Yeah, CBSG, you're on. You're on. Go ahead and unmute yourself. You're still muted. No, CBSG, you're still muted.
You're muted, sir.
I said, do you have this course available any other day than Wednesday?
That you'll have to ask Ankur ji.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'll ask him then. Thank you.
So I just dropped the information for this course this quarter in the chat. It is going to be on Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. The link is in the chat. We're not going to shift this quarter. It's too close to the start. We've already got registrations, but as long as Raghuji is teaching in the future, it'll probably, hopefully you'll be able to join in a future course.
Yeah. On Wednesday, I have joined something else. So that's the reason I wanted to take this maybe in the next cycle.
Yeah, please do, CBSG. Thank you for being on and joining us as always. Sri Kumarji.
Namaskar. Raghuji, this is the first time, and I am not a very dedicated student of Hindu University, but I'm a sympathizer and a supporter. This is the first time I hear you or anyone reconcile Mahabharata with yoga and yoga with psychoanalysis, bringing up Dr. Girindra Sekhar Bose. I was mentored by Girindra Sekhar Bose student for several years.
Wow. Wow.
And
That's
I had
fantastic.
connection with Indian Psychoanalytic Society through him because he was the chief editor
That's right.
of the journal Samiksha.
Samiksha, exactly.
Samiksha, yeah. Dr. C.V. Ramana, who was mentored by Dr. Girindra Sekhar Bose, was the chief editor and he was my mentor.
That's brilliant.
So he introduced me to Dr. Girindra Sekhar Bose and the 20 years of correspondence Dr. Bose had with Freud,
Wow.
which you mentioned.
That's right.
And I read the writings of Dr. Bose very early on in Samiksha on translating and interpreting Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a very beautiful text. Yes, sir.
Yes. And then, of course, he tied in with Mahabharata. And he did not really get completely accepted by Freud because he didn't want to contaminate, Freud did not want to contaminate other streams of thought into his stream of thought.
Yeah.
So even though they were on friendly terms and Freud recognized him, that work left kind of unintegrated. And it is time to really recognize that the Indian thought processes and yoga can be reconciled with psychoanalysis.
Absolutely.
And when all of us are talking about conflict, that is one of the fundamental roles of yoga, tato dvandvana anabhigataha.
Anabhigataha. Brilliant.
That
Yeah.
means the dvandva are the conflicts. Conflicts are the one that really cause problems for human intrapsychic processes. And
Yes.
resolving those is the greatest goal of yoga and the Antaranga yoga. That is my little
Absolutely,
two
sir.
cents worth I want to throw in
Brilliant.
1 minute. Thank you so much for
Brilliant.
giving me time.
Brilliant. Sir, I've been in contact with Anandji, Anand Paranjipiji.
No, I have
And
not
we've
been.
some of his works are brilliant, and his understanding of Yoga Sutra, Western psychology, and all of that is quite exciting. So we've been having a lot of chats on why Yoga Sutra ought to be called psychology.
It is a
And
psychology, yes.
yeah, it is. And I think it was a mistake that somebody put the book in the library in the philosophy section. And forever since, we are treating it as philosophy when it ought to be psychology.
That is correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
I'd love to chat more with you, and especially about your insights into
Well, your
Girindra Shekhar
background as
Bose.
biomedical engineer is of great interest to me. And if I get the email address, I will send some of my work to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Ankurji, you'll have to help us out in this.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sri Kumarji. And this is what Hindu University is about, making these connections online and offline and trying to move forward together. Vaishali ji, I guess you're in India and you're saying the timing may not work. We have a whole learning management system. So if you enroll, the recordings will be available of the courses after. You'll have week by week readings, as was mentioned. We make it accessible. Of course, you want to participate with the dialogue.
Ankurji, yeah, you have, in my course, you cannot do it offline. The interactive, like what Luvina and all of them were saying, is the key. Yeah, this is not an upadesha. You cannot learn by watching somebody, or vicarious learning is not possible, and there is no upadesha, so it won't work unless you're there to be part of the interactions. It won't work.
Yes, but you yourself are in India, so if you're in India and the timing works out, please join, and of course anybody in the world can join with this this technology.
Is somebody else who's come on?
Yeah.
Hari
had raised their hand. Again, if you raise your hand in the participant menu, I'm just gonna promote you, please. If you turn on your camera, we'll be able to see you.
Yeah, Hari, can you speak? Yeah.
Yeah, namaste, Ankurji, namaste, Raghuji. Presentation, and I like the interactive part. I just started learning the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, and that probably is a summary of the Mahabharata itself. Some light on Yoga Sutra and Gita, or is it too vast a subject?
Now, I can give you a quick answer. The interesting speculation that some people have raised is whether the Vyasa who wrote the commentaries on the Yoga Sutra and the Vyasa who wrote the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita are the same person. So the connections between the two texts is very deep. And the Yoga Sutras, because of the nature of the sutra, are quintessential, like almost formulaic statements about the whole process of the mind. And to me, the Mahabharata is just playing out and explicating the entire process that is abstracted in the Yoga Sutra. So to me, there's a one-to-one correspondence between the Yoga Sutra and the Mahabharata. And the Yoga Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita are very closely connected. You'll see similar words coming up, similar ideas coming up. The Bhagavad Gita is much more expanded. The Yoga Sutra is just 196 sutras, and each sutra is about 7 words, and that's about it. So it's very pithy, it's very focused and concentrated. And the Mahabharata is the story form of the Yoga Sutra, in my understanding. And the Bhagavad Gita is a more expanded form of the Yoga Sutra.
Thank you.
Yeah, Arunji, you had a question?
Thank you. So my question was, is there an ideal age where these practices have the most benefit? You mentioned Kriya Yoga, Swadhyay, Ishwar Pranidhana. For a child, let's say less than 10 years old, it's probably too much, or I don't know if too much is the right word, or if it's the right age for them to start realizing these, or obviously if you're older, like much, at a certain stage in your life where you've built up so much karma, and you've gone so much through life where the benefits of these might be there, but hard to come by with practice. So is there a right age to start practicing these where you get the best benefit?
Let me give you two different types of answers. Na? See, Krishnamacharya used to draw a graph. Yeah. So there is, your age on the one side, and then the amount of asana you do, the amount of pranayama you do, and the amount of dhyana that you do. So for children, for young people, you do a lot of asana, a little bit of pranayama, and very little of dhyana. So dhyana for a child would simply be singing some bhajans or doing something, yeah, playful. Then as you grow older, yeah, the balance tilts. You do a lot less of asana, you do a lot more of pranayama, and you do a lot more of dhyana. Right? So what we do in our school and the way Krishnamacharya has taught us is we usually don't teach in groups. We largely teach one-on-one. So we devise a yoga plan which is relevant to you. Right? We don't do the studio stuff usually. We teach children in groups because children's bodies are quite flexible. So you can do a lot more work with it. And children actually like it when they're in a group. They're a little competitive with each other. There's some fun going on and all of that. So that is one answer. The other is that, you start when the calling comes up. Yeah, the first sutra says, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. So whenever this Atha awakening comes, you start studying. There's no time. Yeah. I've taught young children long ago when I was teaching in the Krishnamurti school. I've seen some brilliant reflections coming from young people. I've seen older people get to it. I mean, I don't think there's any question of age at all.
Thank you.
What I'm
Beautiful.
saying
So
is
whatever
join
age
the
you are,
course,
do
Arunji.
participate. Let me before we get to Ganpati, let me put up this poll real quick. Let us know if you're interested in this course. Yes, no, maybe if you have questions. Obviously, this is a course that you want to participate in if you want to have conversation and dialogue and engage and have these thought-provoking conversations. If you want PowerPoints, I don't know if this is the class for you, but let's hear from Ganpati ji. And please fill out the poll. You're on mute, sir.
Hi, namaste.
Namaste.
Raghuji. Yeah, you talked about Swadhyaya and referred to that as Antaranga
Antaranga
Yoga.
Yoga.
Yeah, I was wondering, what about those other things, Shaucham and Santosha? They don't form part of that, or Swadhyaya is particularly Antaranga Yoga? I'm just trying to.
No, it's actually, you can't actually make airtight boxes like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally referred to some of them as Bahiranga Yoga because I can show you some of these things. Right? So asana practice, for example, is very clearly Bahiranga. I can show you an asana. I can see what you're doing. Pranayama, same way I can see and show and tell, right? Your ahimsa, not ahimsa, and all of that, yeah, there is some evidence that can be picked up. So these are clearly more bahiranga to that extent. But all of them have a strong antaranga component in that unless I'm paying attention to these things, it is not yoga at all. So one of the interesting things that Krishnamacharya would say was that I can do an asana. If I'm not paying attention, it is not yoga. So if I don't have the attitude of dhyana in the asana, it's not yoga, right?
Sure.
Some of the other practices like niyamas, which you're referring to, become little more inward. So that's the beginning of the movement to the more antaranga practices. Pratyahara is actually the bridge in a sense, because it's completely inward. And then the others go deeper and deeper inward. So it's actually bahiranga, antaranga, and parama antaranga.
Okay.
So that's one of the things. But these are not divisions, Mr. Ganapati. They're more like emphasis.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but yeah.
Is this course a Sanskritam based mainly, or the
No.
English start?
English. I use Sanskritam every now and again, but generally the lingua franca is English.
Okay.
But what I'm going to be doing in this particular course, Ganapati ji, is look at Mahabharata, not Yoga Sutra.
Okay.
So we're going to look at Yoga Sutra through the Mahabharata, more or less. Yeah. The focus is going to be on how to understand the archetypal Pandavas within us.
Thank you.
One more question, Raghuji. This is
Yeah.
Arun. So I've been doing yoga for quite some time. I mean, not quite some time, at least 3 years. And I've definitely noticed a lot of changes internally in terms, not just flexibility, but calmness, peacefulness, and just kind of awakening, you could say, in different realms. You kind of get some answers to certain questions that come up spontaneously. And I'm a physician, so I'm always curious about how these things happen. I have not been able to figure out what is the actual process by which the asanas and the pranayam actually affects the body and the mind in terms of like a biological process. Like, I understand it makes difference, but is there some understanding that you can provide? Like, what is the technical process by which, are there energy channels that are being opened, and in what way? How does the yoga affect the mind, is on a more sort of scientific basis?
Yeah, Arunji, that's a big question. Let me just give you a quick answer with a little bit of time that we have. See, first of all, yoga does not look at the body and the mind as separate. It doesn't have these Cartesian divisions at all. There's a whole different cosmology, and the way we look at it is very, very different. Yeah. That said, there's a lot of work that's been done by people like Dr. Porges, Stephen Porges, who's done work on what's called the vagal tone. And he talks about a lot of impact that the vagal tone has on the whole body. And all of asana practice, all of pranayama practice, all of chanting, all of them impact the vagal tone very, very directly. Right. And then there is all this old work about, parasympathetic dominance and sympathetic dominance and so on, which has been happening for quite some time, since I was in college, which was in the late 70s. Right. And this has been very well documented that the more asana practice you do, the more parasympathetic dominant you get. And that has a whole set of effects on you and so on. So there's a very clear psychological correlate to these practices, but I think that is not the direction in which to understand yoga, because scientific positivist thinking is not yogic thinking. So just because there are correlates that you can measure, it doesn't tell you anything about the practice. And these scientific correlates don't actually, they don't capture the essence of the practice. Right. And I've also seen very ridiculous experimentation done. There's some great experimentation. There's some terrible experimentation. So the cosmos in which, yoga is set, which comes from Sankhya, is very different from the Western thing. So we have to tread this a little carefully.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a whole logic which is very internally very consistent within the Sankhya yoga framework, which does not require anything else, except that today people require what they call scientific, evidence. But scientific evidence doesn't teach you how to meditate.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. My name is Dr. Dutt, and I just want to say what I learned. I want to make this comment that yoga comes from root word yuj in the Sanskrit. Yuj means to unite. Yoga means union with God. Then the question is, who am I? I am not this body, this mind, this intellect. I am that immutable, omniscient, all-pervading, self-luminous, imperishable, infinite, eternal, nameless, formless, attributeless, indescribable, ununderstandable, inexperiencable, incomprehensible, inconceivable, indefinable, immobile Brahman. Where am I? Contrary to the popular thinking, I was not. I was, I am, and I will be. Who am? Where did I come from? Contrary to popular thinking, I have not come from anywhere. I was, I am, and I will be. So ultimate goal is for us in meditation, we have to transcend our mind, intellect, equipment to realize our true nature. That is a true yoga. That is what I understood from Bhagavad Gita. That means our goal is yoga. Our goal is ultimately to realize our true nature, self-realization, to become Jivan Mukta, liberated while we are still in this body. Then we will have eternal happiness, because blissfulness has no meaning. Happiness has a beginning and middle and end. That is, I eat one laddu, I'm happy. Second laddu, I'm happy. Fifth, sixth, and I'm unhappy. So I need to go to a state where I will be blissful, which has no diminution. And so ultimately the goal is for us to realize our true nature, become Jivan Muktas, liberated while you are still in this embodiment. Then we will have eternal blissfulness. That is what I have understood, but I would like to learn more from you, from the class in future.
Thank you, sir.
So
we take a very simple idea. There are many ideas to the word yoga. There's one idea of the word yoga which Shankaracharya talks about is apraptasya prapti yogam. So there's something I've not attained. There's some movement and some maturity that I've not attained today. If through some practice I can attain it, that is called yoga. So you just take a step at a time, and every step you take is yoga. This God union and all that is very far away. And while that might be an aspirational endpoint, every step is yoga, and that is what we focus on, of how to take the next step. So to take the next step, I have to look at myself clearly to understand where I am and who I am today. What is my state of confusion? What is my state of clarity? And what might be the next step? So we keep it very grounded, very simple, and we have a lot of fun in the class.
Okay, thanks.
We laugh a lot. we look at each other with a lot of compassion, with a lot of curiosity. We look at ourselves the same way and play with some ideas. And somebody just talked about Piaget. The only way to learn is to play. So that's what we do. And I think learning is a side benefit of looking at the Mahabharata figures, playing with them, and taking them inside, taking them outside, and a lot that comes out of this process. Yes, Sri Kumarji.
I put in my comments in the chat already.
Okay.
Just simply, again, the abstract thinking is very important for achievement for a child. Like you mentioned, Raghuji, it can start very early for some very lucky children, but most children attain that at the age of 12, according to Piaget.
Correct. Also, according to yoga, sir, there's a lot of parallels in this. It will be very interesting to discuss it because there are some, very, very, very incredible similarities in much of what is said. Yeah. The age might differ slightly, but there are clear parallels and very, very interesting. Yeah. Yes, Ankurji, I see you back on the screen.
Yeah, I don't have
time to close.
No, I mean, if people still have questions, it's up to you, Raghuji. I know it's getting late there. We still have the poll open. Please, if you haven't filled it out, just click one of the buttons. Let us know. Makes it easier for us to follow up. You got into this a little bit, but the origins of the term of Antaranga Yoga.
It's there in the Yoga Sutras. So I don't know if it was there earlier, but the Bahiranga, Antaranga, and all that are clearly mentioned in the Yoga Sutra. Yeah, so it's at least 500 BC. That's the origin of the word, as far as I know. And Antaranga and Bahiranga are very simple Sanskrit words. Yeah, a lot of the ideas of yoga have already been talked about in Mahabharata, which is much older as a text. And there's a whole dialogue between Bhishma and Yudhishthira when Bhishma is on his deathbed, where he speaks about Sankhya, he speaks about yoga, and he speaks about Ayurveda. And it's a very interesting combination because Ayurveda also has a similar kind of a thing of Shamanam, Shodhanam, Arogyam, and Swasthyam. So there's a similar 4-step process, if you like to call it that way, in yoga also. So the more superficial dealing with symptomatic things, which is the first step in Ayurveda, has a similar parallel in yoga, asana, pranayama, and things like that. So you go deeper and deeper. And Ayurveda starts talking about the mind, the more it goes into arogya. So there are practices of meditation and all that which are recommended, and swasthya in samadhi and many of those practices have a big overlap. And Ayurveda is much older than Yoga Sutra. Yoga Sutra is a compilation of all the yoga practices till then. So I'm quite certain that the idea of Antaranga must be much older.
Thank you for that. So I'm dropping again in the chat the course. Please enroll, fill out the poll if you haven't. Do any of the other now panelists have any questions or other things that they want to share? And then we can give it to Raghuji for closing thoughts. And so we will be sending an email afterwards with links to this replay, with some other, maybe other things that Raghuji wants to share with you. And that'll go out after the webinar. Raghuji, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you and your work with HUA. take us out, Raghuji. How would you like to end this webinar?
What would I like to do with this webinar? I just say, come and experience what we have to offer you. Yeah.
Simple and to the point. Come and experience what we have to offer you. Thank you.
I'll just add one point that Raghu makes in the class, which is to remind us that we're a cosmic joke, to not take things too seriously. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending. Raghuji, all our panelists. Namaste. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Namaste.